Greetings. Welcome to this episode of GPT, Grace People's Talk. And here we are talking about Romans chapter 9 to 11. I'm Pastor Guru, and this is Nova with me. The previous episode, we spoke about the context of this chapter, these chapters 9, 10, 11. It has to be the nation of Israel. It is not pointing to any particular individual. And we spoke about how the nation came into being. It is not according to the flesh of man. And then we spoke about how the nation came into being. It is not according to the good or a bad deed that was done by the person, but it is according to the gracious choice. And then we spoke about the words love and hate, how we are supposed to understand with respect to the idiom of speech that was widely used in the first century. And in this episode, we are going to be focusing on one of the most important verse, and I think I want Noah to do the talking in this episode. And this is one verse that is really, so a lot of people ask a question about it. So did God harden the heart of Pharaoh? And do you think that God was unjust when he is doing something to Pharaoh, such as like hardening the heart? What do you understand? And I want to know, if you could share, it will be great.
Yeah, so first, in order to understand this verse, we need to understand the nature and character of God. Who is God? What is the nature and character of God? Will God purposefully harden the heart of a person, or God would choose a person to be a vessel of destruction and a person to go to heaven? So, is this really based on salvation? Is this nationwide? So, in order for us to understand, we need to actually go deep inside and understand the nature and character of God. On the other hand, we can also try to defend God by saying that, oh, God could have done this way, God could have thought that way. But here the scripture is very clear, and God, in Apostle Paul, when he writes, he says that God hardened the heart of Pharaoh. And that is true, because in Exodus also it says that God hardened the heart of Pharaoh. But in order to understand why God hardened the heart of Pharaoh, we need to actually go back to Exodus and see what happened before God actually hardening the heart of Pharaoh. And for that, we'll turn to Exodus chapter 7, verse 14. In 7 verse 14, actually what happens is Moses goes and sees first, initially, before actually Pharaoh doing anything, Moses goes and visits Pharaoh. God says to Pharaoh that you go and you speak to Pharaoh, but I will harden the heart of Pharaoh. Which means God is not saying that I've already hardened the heart of Pharaoh and it is already done. God is saying I will harden the heart of Pharaoh, which will happen in the future. So now Moses goes to Pharaoh and Pharaoh rejects God. And we see in 7 verse 14, Pharaoh's heart is hard and he refuses to let go of people. And we see here clearly that Pharaoh hardens his heart. His heart is already hard, and he is hardening his heart towards God. And also on the other verse, we see in chapter 8, verse 15, Pharaoh saw that there was relief. He hardened his heart and he did not heed. And again, we see here, it is not God who hardened the heart of Pharaoh. It is not God's hand that is intervening in here. And it is Pharaoh actually who hardened the heart. And actually, in chapter 9, verse 34, also we see that Pharaoh saw that the rain, the hail, and the thunder had ceased. He sinned yet more and he hardened his heart. So, all these places we see that Pharaoh hardens his heart. And again, after that, only after that, we see that God hardens his heart. In chapter 10, verse 1, we see that go into Pharaoh, for I have hardened his heart. So this is where God actually hardens the heart of Pharaoh. It's not like God is intentionally, hardening the heart of Pharaoh, but God was long suffering. God was patient with Pharaoh. God met Pharaoh and God said, Pharaoh, turn, turn. But he continually made a choice in his heart to not let go of the people and continuously went against God. Therefore, he hardened his heart. And there is another word in Hebrew which which is called chasach. Chasach means it's not the hardening as to like blocking. It's a hardening as in heavy. The heart is heavy. When God says that he will harden the heart of Pharaoh, God is not saying, I'm going to block Pharaoh from ever listening to me. But God says, I'm going to make his heart heavy yet more. Because his heart was already hard, God says, I'm going to make his heart heavy. And therefore, he was not able to comply with God, and therefore God had to judge him. And this term is called judicial hardening, because God hardened Pharaoh's heart not unto salvation, not unto personal vengeance, but actually the justice of God is being poured out, is being executed on Pharaoh, because God is holy and God is righteous and God had to execute his judgment. And therefore, Pharaoh's heart was hardened, and therefore, Pharaoh was executed, and therefore, it all happened. And we see these things throughout the scripture. It is not only Pharaoh's heart and Pharaoh's judgment. We also go back to Genesis, where God says that he has a standard, a measure of sins that has to be filled for the Amorites. He has kept 4 generations. God was long suffering till he judged them and gave the land to Israelites. So we see that also in Habakkuk, where God says to Habakkuk, Habakkuk was continuously whining about what is happening, justice, injustice all over the place. And Habakkuk is actually asking God, God, what is happening? And God says to Habakkuk that even if I told you what I'm about to do, you will not understand. And what God actually meant is that God is going to bring Chaldeans, the Babylonians, to judge the nation of Israel for their sins and for their injustice. And we see here, this is also the judicial judgment of God. And we also see that God is executing judgment against the nation of Israel, and that is judicially. And we also see that in Nineveh, Jonah goes to the land of Nineveh and he preaches throughout the land, and the people actually repents, and God changes his mind. God was about to execute his judicial judgment on Nineveh, but when Nineveh turned their heart, God actually did not execute his judgment. And seeing all these things, God's intention is not to destroy, not to execute judgment, but give them the time to change their heart and come to God, so that God can forgive them, God can be merciful, and God can be gracious to them, and God can show them to them.
I love the way you explained. Uh, the first point is that so you don't have to defend God. That is interesting. And the truth needs no defense, and it can stand by itself. And the second thing that you spoke about, the hardening is after uh, several chances, and it is the judicial hardening that is happening to Pharaoh. And in Romans chapter 11, verse 25, God is also talking about the nation of Israel. A partial hardening has happened unto the nation of Israel. And the plan for nation of Israel is set aside because God is dealing with that particular nation judicially with respect to hardening their heart. And I read somewhere, so the sun rays falls on the clay, and the sun rays falls on the ice. And the clay and the ice are basically, my hearts. If my heart is going to be like a clay, and the sun ray is no going to harden my heart, and if my heart is going to be like the ice, and the sun ray would melt the ice. And it is a beautiful explanation. Thank you so much, Noah. So much we have spoken, and I love the way you spoke about after so many years in Genesis 15:20. I think Genesis 15:16. God was waiting for the nation of Amorites sin to be full. And similarly, you said, after several trials, God executed his judicial step towards Pharaoh. And we want to talk about the long suffering of God. And I think we need to take the next episode on that and speak about the long suffering of God. And thank you so much for watching GPT. And we will continue to speak on Romans chapter 9, 10, and 11. God bless you. Thank you.